All right then. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello and welcome to the Amish Inquisition episode 353 on Sunday, the 10th of November 2024. I'm Phil.
I am Ben.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight we're very happy to be joined, hopefully down the line by the power of internet, by the host of That Death Show, Anne Kelly. Are you reading us, Anne?
I am reading you loud and clear. It is so wonderful to be here with you. Thank you for the invite. What an intro that was. Thank you for that too.
You're more than welcome. I don't think I've ever been thanked for the quality of my intros before.
It's brilliant. It was brilliant.
Oh, well, you can come again, Anne. We'll have you back on.
Well, wait till we're over and then we'll see what you think.
Now then, Anne, That Death Show. Let's start with that because you've started this new YouTube channel with another previous guest of ours, Tim Wyatt. And you're talking all about death and demystifying death. What's it all about, and why did you decide to embark on this venture?
Well, it started, you guys, with the love of the theosophical teachings, theosophy, the perennial philosophy, if you will. The channel for many years was called Living Theosophy. And I would do audiobooks of The Voice of the Silence. Then I would do book studies on the key to theosophy. And then I started doing more and more. I started working with other theosophists or people in the theosophical circles. And I just tried to get these ageless wisdoms out into the world. I'm a former radio and television broadcaster. And I thought, how can I be of service? What can I do? So for the past 10 years, that channel, that YouTube channel, has been Living Theosophy. And recently, in working with Tim and talking about through understanding death, we can learn the meaning of life. That's really part of the teachings. It's such an essential part of it. So I thought, why don't we take the name Theosophy out? Because not everybody understands what that means. I did see the masters were in your intro, and I thought that was interesting. But it's basically the commonalities of all the world's religions, sciences, and philosophies. Nobody owns this stuff. This is not exclusive, it's inclusive. It belongs to all and solely to none. So how can we get those teachings out into the world? Why don't we take the name Theosophy off, a little confusing, and go with death? Because that's one of my favorite subjects. Through the application of these teachings, I have no fear of death. The method of death is questionable, whether that will be painful. I think we all think that. But I realize now we are eternal beings and death is simply a door, a transition. And it is something that a lot of people don't like to talk about. So we started building this a couple months back and we just finished our 3rd or 4th episode. I was editing that today. That's why I have to say hats off to you. I see all the hard work that goes into this. So we called it That Death Show, trying to think, how can we reach the masses to
Sorry,
okay.
We had
That's okay.
I don't know whether it was a voltage spike or something, but just as you were wrapping up that introduction, the audio just cut out.
Oh, don't worry. I
shame.
feel your pain. It's not a problem. I am totally used to all that. The pain and suffering. That's fine. That's great. I'm glad you're back. I'm glad it wasn't me doing something wrong.
No, it's always me.
Always
That's what I found it out. It's always me. It's always on my end. It's never the case.
Oh,
Oh,
it's so
dear.
much nicer to be the guest then. Thank you. But
Well,
I will take some credit for it.
yeah, I mean, you must have been a guest on lots of different shows, mustn't you, Anne, over the years, and talking about these subjects?
Well, I have done lots of theosophical talks,
Right.
and I did quite a bit on Living Theosophy on that channel. I tried everything. I have a TikTok that was Living Theosophy, and I would try being cheeky, funny, silly, because spiritual things, you don't have to be so damn serious all the time. It's about life in the now, not because these texts were written thousands of years ago. Does it have to be so solemn and somber? I tried everything. I was on TikTok, on YouTube. I would do theosophical talks. I tried to do different types of presentations and change it up a little bit. But as far as being a guest, I've done several podcasts as a guest. Not as many as I did way back in the radio days, but I wasn't talking about theosophy then. I was talking about, Led Zeppelin or Aerosmith and stuff like that. So, no, I really haven't done that many as a guest.
How did you get into theosophy?
Well, I moved from the United States, from California, to the United Kingdom in 2009. And my son was about 8 or 9 years old at the time. And to make an international move like that, there was lots involved. And this custody battle raged on. His father was not really that involved to begin with, but an international move is a big thing. And it started to be this massive war. And I never would have moved to give him this better life if I thought that there was going to be any pain or drama. And I could see after a few months of this battle raging on that what children need are parents that get along and work together for the best interest of the child. What you think is the best interest may not be the best interest. Peaceful parents is the goal. So I realized after this move that I was going to have to let him go back to the States. Now, I thought I was going to die. Now, that's a really condensed version. I really did go through huge heartbreak and grief. To live without him, I didn't even know. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just thought there's no reason to live. But there was a book that I had found because I was always interested in the New Age movement, always looking in Wayne Dyer or looking in any of the teachings. I never found it until I cracked this one book that I bought in Santa Monica at the Bodhi Tree. It's called, oh, I should have grabbed it for you. It's called The Advanced Course in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism. And during this time of great psychological pain, when my son was back in the 6,000 miles away, my only child, I cracked this book. I thought, I have nothing to lose. I'm just going to read this stupid thing that I brought it over with me. And every page seemed to make sense. I go, what is this? What am I reading? The Advanced Course in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism. Now, I thought, and it was written in 1904, something like that, William Walker Atkinson. So I read it and read it and read it, and I felt better and better and better. I seemed to understand just a little bit more. And then I was on a quest, like a Da Vinci Code quest. What is this book? Who is this person? But I found out that at the very end of that book, it did say that this was a nod towards the Theosophical classic Light on the Path. And I went, what is the Theosophical classic? What is Theosophy? So then I Googled, and the year was like 2011, 2012. And then I found out there are Theosophical centers. And I was thinking in my mind that they'd be like IKEA because this stuff was brilliant. This is what I was looking for. So I went and I thought I'm going to find these places. And I went online and they were very quiet and a little bit dusty and a little bit reserved. There were no people there. And I said, you guys, this is your fingers on the pulse of something amazing. What is this? So I studied with them. I took their diploma courses. I was baffled that there was nobody there. And I just was insatiable. So I went on from the advanced course in Yogi Philosophy and Oriental Occultism to Light on the Path. And that led, of course, to the Voice of the Silence, the ultimate text. A sacred metaphysical poem to some, but to me, oh my God, I ended up voicing it. I put it up on YouTube. More people need to have access to this. So anyway, I became a voracious student and I just was passionate. I felt I have to do something. I have got to do something to help. How can I help? What do I do? My skill is speaking and presenting. So I tried that. And so Theosophy it was that book that absolutely cracked everything open for me. William Walker Atkinson, also the Kabbalion, you'll be familiar with that as the Three Initiates. Oh my God, just these texts. Oh, They're life-changing, changed my life, changed my understanding of many things in my own life. Everyday dramas and trials and tribulations, absolutely a game changer. I wish to serve and get them out there. So that's what happened. Once 2012, when I came across it, I don't know what to say. It's everything to me. But I do want to clarify that Theosophy is not the Theosophical Society. Theosophy is as old as time itself. The Theosophical Society came into being at the end of the 1800s. And then you always have human dramas and the garrulous parents and stuff. So Theosophy is not the Theosophical Society. However, there are many wonderful people in the society, just like any other organization.
Yeah, it's funny how one thing leads to another, or one book leads to another, I've found. You'll be reading something, or you'll be reading a couple of books, and you start seeing the same names recurring. So Blavatsky is the obvious one. You start seeing, you start recognizing names like Rudolf Steiner, and these people keep cropping up. You think, oh, well, maybe I should grab a book by Rudolf Steiner then. And then you'll pick up a Rudolf Steiner book, and he'll reference some other guys and gals, and you'll pick those books up, and you just end up down this sort of endless rabbit hole of spiritual teaching. Oh, Gurdjieff, Uspensky, and it goes on and on and on, and you just can't get through it all.
It's true. It's true. And I would have to say I don't know if it's just a thing with humanity. We tend to idolize the scribe who wrote it down. We make them the god or whatever. Like even with Blavatsky, by her own admission, she said, I just wrote this stuff down. She was a worthy scribe, a secretary. That's it. But some people are like, oh my God, no, it has to be Blavatsky, this, Blavatsky, that. I go, stop that. The teachings will explain in great detail, as I'm sure many of your guests who have come on. It's within you. It is within you, and this is where all the work takes place. It's not going to be a spiritual, supernatural hero that's going to fall from the sky and save you. It's going to be you through the work that you do on yourself with these instructions.
Right. So going back to the subject of your new show, Death, the Grim Reaper, the final destination.
Yep, Joe Black.
That's true.
Joe Black, yeah, meet Joe Black. Why? What are some of the misconceptions we have, or what are the problems that we have getting our heads around death? I get the feeling that one of the big problems we have is our fear, and considering it's something that is probably the only guarantee in life, is that it's going to end at some point, that all of us having this fear of it is kind of almost irrational.
I agree. Yes, I agree. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to talk over you. Please continue.
I was done. You go.
I'm so sorry. Well, as far as death is concerned, absolutely. That's the thing, is we celebrate happy birthday, 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 birthday. If you have a birthday, the guarantee there's going to be change in the middle, and there's going to be death. We are all going to die. We're absolutely all going to die. And it's completely normal, and it's completely natural. And you watch television or you watch the news, look at the big stories, look at the movie plots. Oh, the very worst possible thing that could happen is death. And that's because we have this materialist view, because we operate, a majority of us operate from the world of the senses: taste, touch, sight, sound, smell. And that's all we think that there is. And that's what science right now, we're on the cusp of some stuff, but right now science just says that that's all that there is. There's nothing but oblivion. But in the teachings, in these ageless teachings, the perennial philosophy, theosophy, whatever you want to call it, the Gupta Vidya, is being validated by these near-death experiences that are coming back. Now, there are some near-death experiences that are, you can tell it's not the real thing, but if you listen for the genuine ones, it will literally line up completely with these ancient teachings. They tell you the same thing. So you don't have to have a near-death experience to bring back the wisdom that's gained there. We don't end. We are eternal beings, and this is just a day. This particular life is just a day. So all these things we take so seriously, and this great fear of la, 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 I don't want to talk about it. It's going to happen. You might as well, you can learn really how to live and what the secret of life is by understanding that death is just a doorway, a transition, a graduation to another existence, and you don't end. And that would change everything. Think about the law of karma. If we understood that the balance, what you do, everything you say and everything you do, you will experience from the other person's point of view, that would be the ultimate lawkeeper. If we would just understand that, but we don't. And many people are afraid to talk about death. And some people literally stop living if somebody that they love dies. And grief is very, very real. I don't mean to demean that, but I'm thinking if you could understand that they're not over, they just taken off their suit, that this bodysuit that they wear. They're still very much alive, if not more so. So I just wanted to try to, how can I get these teachings out into the world so people can maybe grab them and find a little bit of comfort and inspiration. And working with Tim Wyatt, who is just a machine, a fantastic opportunity. So we're just going to give it our best shot. We don't even know what we're doing. We're just going to do our best.
Me and Matt, we just finished this book, didn't we? We read it. You read it, and then I read it. It's Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the death and dying lady. She's known as, isn't she?
Yeah, it's her autobiography, isn't it?
But this is her The Wheel of Life. It's called. It's her memoir, essentially.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love that you're open to it. You're more open than most people. Most people are either embarrassed, ashamed, or desperately afraid to talk about death. There's nothing wrong with it. Absolutely nothing wrong with it. We're all going to die, but it's okay.
One of the takeaways I got from the book was something she mentioned about learning how you have to live well to die well. Am I getting that right?
I think so, yeah. So like people, tend to have regrets, don't they?
That was a big theme is regrets.
Mm-hmm. If you've not lived a true life or lived your life in the way that you would have liked to, that's often quite a regret for people on their deathbed. But she would talk to people and get people to come round and kind of accept that maybe it wasn't quite as bad as what they thought it was in terms of their life and how they've led it and all that kind of thing, and that would help them basically to let go, essentially, a lot of the time. She talks about
what was surprising was the medical industry. How the doctors, the people who were caring after people who were terminally ill, they almost didn't want to admit that their patients were dying.
Well, there was a pathological denial of death in the 60s in the hospital that she was working in, and nobody would admit that someone was dying, essentially. It was like a great taboo, and it was all about, no, you'll be fine, we'll just try this one more round of chemo, and you'll pull through if you do it a little bit more aggressively and all the rest of it.
It's false hope, doesn't it, in a way?
Yeah.
Well, she started holding these seminars on with like the medical staff and medical students, and she'd bring a terminally ill patient in and interview her, essentially. And it was like getting the patient's perspective, someone who's not long for this world. And it was a massive roaring success, wasn't it? But it became kind of notorious as well. People wanted to shut her down, didn't they? They kept trying to stop her from doing this.
And I think eventually it got too big, didn't it? For people
too big to fail.
Yeah, for the hospital to prevent her from doing it. Yeah.
But yeah, she's an absolute trendsetter, I think, in trying to change our conceptions of death from the medical industry point of view, at least.
Did that then become an aspect of palliative care then in modern medicine from that time in the 60s onwards? If elements of it were retained, by modern doctors today.
I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I have got a personal story. It's about 12 years ago, but there's someone close to me who died, and the doctors then wouldn't admit. She was quite clearly not going to pull through, but the doctors weren't for saying, that she's probably not going to make it, kind of thing. And it was strange, because I think we all knew that she wasn't going to get any better, this person, and then like the doctor kind of saying, well, they wouldn't say that she was going to die, essentially. He said, oh, well, if you just give it a few days or a week or whatever. And like she was on life support and all the rest of it. And then they removed the life support. And even at that point, I won't go into too much graphic detail, but there was things going on that was quite clear, basically, that she wasn't going to pull through or whatever. And even at that point, the doctors were very reluctant to say anything. But quite interestingly, a nurse said, this means this means that, and it's probably not going to, she's probably not going to make it, kind of thing. But it was strange, so that's only 12 years ago that even then that doctors were kind of a bit reluctant to say that they were going to die, essentially.
I wonder, Anne, if this is symptomatic of the problem at hand, it seems to me from that anecdote that the doctors are afraid to sort of give the bad news, if you like, the bad news to the family. And so they're kind of in denial. And it's because of this overarching stigma around death that would make the doctors reluctant to tell the family of someone that this person's going to die. Do you think that's possible?
Well, I think for some reason in the Western world that we want to preserve, I guess, until what we're 99, and that's anything before that is a failure. People are gonna die, all the time at every age. And I think they might take it. I think the medical industry takes it as a failure if they don't save somebody. And I have seen people completely freak out and go, it wasn't their time. And I'm thinking, it was, because they went. It certainly was their time. And it will be my time someday. And it will be your time someday. And that's totally okay. And I think somewhere, somehow, I don't know if it was the Victorians or just the wars of the last century where we just freaked out so hard that death, it couldn't happen. But it is going to happen. And if we had a more normal, natural understanding, totally fine. Everybody's going to do it. Everybody who's ever lived. Everyone who has ever lived, like think of the Neil Diamond song, Done Too Soon. I don't know if that's too old for you, but I mean, all those names of all the people who've lived have died, and we will die. And in 100 years, none of the people we know will be alive. There's nothing wrong with that. Why don't we just try to look at it like that, from a perspective that is a physical death only? You're stopping this avatar that you're living in. That stops. You don't stop. You continue, and everything that you were here, you don't get to take the fame or the money or all the stuff we trip out about, but the love and the lessons and all that you do get to take with you. There's lots to understand through understanding that death is very normal, natural, and completely a guarantee. We can learn how to live a better life. I believe we can. And I think I'm just confused. I don't understand why people are not more receptive to that, because it would just save so much drama. It would save so much pain if we would just get our heads around that. And I don't know if that answered your question. My apologies if I went on a tangent.
Do you know what I think one of the issues might be? It's a theory that I have, is that we're much more detached from death than we were just maybe 100 years ago. If you went back 100 or 150 years, the majority of parents would lose, was it 1 in 3 children, maybe?
Yeah.
It was much closer to home. It was more common, whereas now we're kind of detached from it. And because of, improvements in maternity care and infant mortality and various other medical improvements that have happened, just sanitation and stuff like that, we most of us live to a decent age, and we're more sort of detached from the process, and so it comes as a bigger shock, and we're less well adapted to it, and that makes us more fearful of it, maybe.
I think there's the fact that we hold medics up as heroes in a lot of cases. So anyone who cures or extends life or does anything is held up to being, in very high regard and as a heroic status. I think you're right. Even going back 100 years, our relationship as a culture with death was completely different. And you can go further back, and it seems to me that almost every previous culture has had a much better relationship with death and the process of death than we have now. So it seems like a modern failure, if you will, of our society as a species at the moment. I don't think there's anywhere. It's probably different in modern society around the world, and there will be cultures where death is better dealt with.
India, maybe.
China.
What do you know about how death? Because you mentioned in the previous comment that this seems to be particularly a Western problem. So, what do you think, Anne, about? Is there anything we can learn from other cultures today and the way they treat death?
Well, I think we absolutely should look at other cultures and our own history. I'm not sure when or why, and Tim and I were talking about this. It was necessary to literally polish and preserve the body with chemicals and then bury it in a box in the ground just for the grieving ones who are behind. I don't understand I just don't get it. Or people who say, I wish I was immortal. I'm like, why would you do that? This is just, why would you honestly preserve your brain to, it doesn't make any sense. life on earth is very painful and difficult. It is also a beautiful place, but this is a place of great suffering, which means great learning. And you are here for a short period of time in this incarnation. You get a break in between. You do definitely come back. I don't know if it's this particular planet. If you look at our ever expanding universe, there's lots more to our story we don't know. But I definitely think we could look at even like if you're walking through nature, you see the leaves falling down and they're going to become mulch for the next year's growth. That's just us. That's what we're doing. And it wasn't long ago. I think I was in a house over here when I first moved here. They had an old room, the coffin room, where they actually would show the coffin of the family member. And it was set aside for coffins only because there were so many deaths. They would have the viewing there. So this particular room, which I think was an ironing room then, was actually for coffins. And I'm coming from America. I was like, oh my God, you just don't have that. Just like la, 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 it doesn't happen. And I see people lose their minds about when somebody passes away, but it's a guarantee. So why don't we get our heads around what it's for, what happens, what do we do while we're here in the meantime? In that little parenthesis between birth and death, that's what we need to be paying attention to. Birth happened, death will happen. Pay attention to what's going on here and make the most of it. This is a completely mind-blowing opportunity of being alive. This is where the most intense learning can take place. And that's in all those teachings as well.
There's a preoccupation with death, even when people are supposed to be living their lives. So, for instance, just this week, someone told me, "Oh, don't eat that bacon. It takes an hour off your life." And I said, well, I said, can I have that hour now, or do I have to wait till I'm on my deathbed or decrepit at 99 or 120, however long I live? But it just seems crazy that you would make that bargain for additional time later when you can't use it.
No, I don't understand it. I just don't get it. But a lot of people, if we knew that death was not the end, that it is a new beginning, as Tim says, his phrases are, it's not a tragedy. It is not permanent. It's not fatal or final. And it isn't. And if we understood that, the way that we would behave here and the things that we would crave and long for and murder each other for, we would knock that off, because no one gets away with anything. Nothing goes unbalanced. Even the tiniest little things that you've said out of being crappy to someone or selfish or cruel, everything, you will experience that, not only in your past life review, but in a physical body from their perspective, which is horrifying.
I like the imagery the Egyptians used in the Book of the Dead, and it has is it the scribe?
Scales.
Well, there's a scale, and they weigh your heart with against a feather, and the scribe, I think, is it Hermes? No, that's the Greek one. Thoth, it'll be. Is like writing down, is your heart heavier than a feather? It's like, oh gosh, I hope that don't happen, because if it is, you're going to get devoured by this crocodile beast. Yeah, it's a bit grim. But do you think this world's like a training ground, Anne?
I think it's a school. I definitely think we're here to learn. We're definitely here to learn because that pain is the usher of wisdom. And there's a lot of really difficult things that take place here on Earth. This is hell, is what they call it in the teachings. It's called Mialba, which means any man-inhabited planet is a hell. Because think of what we do to each other. Think of the horrors. The Hollywood can't even come close. Dante can't come close, and poetry can't come close to the cruelty that we do to each other here and all beings. So we are here, and it is not a comfortable place to be. Have you had near-death experiences on your channel? If not, you should. Okay. When they bring this information back, they say the exact same things. If they've had a genuine near-death experience, the same thing of what this life is for. They come back with the understanding that they are here to love and compassion, and to become compassion and love, and not sweat the small stuff, the stuff that was so big about other people's perceptions or achievements and vanity and wealth and all that kind of stuff. You need enough to live, but you're here for a purpose. And yes, I do believe this is a place of learning. Is it? It can be a hell, but it also, there's much potential for light. But yes, and also it's a sold out show. I don't know if you're familiar with Buddha at the Gas Pump. It's a big podcast in the States, huge spiritual podcast. Anyway, the host of that show said, and I'm paraphrasing one of his guests, is he said that the angels are jealous of humans because of the opportunity that is here. You're here in the physical, and the access to the spiritual is the ultimate place for evolution. There's nothing like it. It is one of the most difficult places, if not the most difficult place in the universe, they say. So I don't know about all that. I can't prove that, but I do know through my own experience and understanding that that doesn't seem far off the mark. And this is nothing to throw away. We must cherish this gift of life and understand that when the death takes place, which it will, it's just a doorway. You don't end. Your physical body, you will recycle it. But it's like taking off your jeans. That's it. You're going to move forward. You don't end, but your genes stay behind and they return to the earth. But you continue. And that to me, I find very comforting.
I finished
and horrifying. Yeah, sorry.
I finished a book recently. I think it was called Journey of Souls or Journey of the Souls. I just looked behind me to try and find it. I can't find it. And it was written by this dude who was, I think he was a psychologist who then went into specialize in hypnotherapy. And he started doing hypno-regression, past life regression. And he was getting stories from his clients under hypnosis of the soul journey after death and going back to the source. And the correlations he was getting between hundreds, it ended up being. He ended up doing this for decades of people describing a very similar soul journey after death and where they go to. The correlation with near-death experiences was quite striking as well. It was pretty out there for me. It's like, but I don't know. We'll all find out one day, I guess. But
yes, we certainly will.
Yeah.
I say look for the commonalities. Look for the commonalities of them all. The religion, science, and philosophy, and the near-death experiences. Just look for the commonalities, and you'll start to see it coming through. And then you just follow your heart. And I think it would just be so. If I don't know. I just want to be able to have more people have access to them, because through the access to them, and don't have to get it at that death show or anything that I'm a part of. Find the teachings, apply them, become them. Your life will get better. And things that are really painful and difficult, you'll see it's a cycle. Everything is a cycle. Life, death, birth, death, sun up, sundown, tides rise and fall, difficulties and good times. Everything is cyclical. It doesn't stay the same. I think we think there's going to be a happily ever after, and there's not. There will be happies, but then they fade, and then crappies come in, and those are intense, but they will fade. Everything is cyclical. It's all in those beautiful teachings.
Well, it's yin yang, isn't it? It's Hermetics 101. You need light, and you can't recognize darkness without light, suffering without joy. You know, if we were just a flat line, these things are polar, aren't they? It's a polar aspect to our lives, and you know, it's like taste, salt, sweet. Everything's contrast. Contrast is where we can derive meaning from things, and it's the same with joy and suffering.
Yeah, that's so beautifully said. Thank you.
Not quite. Kind of butchered it.
I think it was.
My verbal intelligence isn't far off a potato.
I disagree.
Going back to the show, I'll tell you one thing that's great is that reading's difficult. A lot of us don't have time for reading. And, you know, if you imagine how many books maybe you've consumed over your years of researching the ageless wisdom, having something that's on YouTube, people can listen to it while they're walking the dog, while they're driving to work, while they're on the train, while they're doing the washing up. And it makes it so much more accessible, doesn't it?
It does. Oh, thank God for that modern technology. And here we all have it right in our pockets. We have it right there. So we can go into any library in the world. And now my industry is completely wiped out. AI has replaced us. You don't need us. But back in the day, you know, voicing an audiobook, that was a really big deal. And I did voice a few of those to get them out there. The Voice of the Silence, I cannot recommend enough. It's not that long. Just they're out there. There's free versions on YouTube. Light on the Path is another one. Yes, absolutely. You can access these. If you're watching this podcast, just Google. You can just go over in Plato's. You can listen to anything you want. These teachings are out there. These ones that only used to be in the libraries, these dusty shelves. Now they're all over the world, and you just push a button and you can listen to your computer, read it to you, and your phone.
There's a link in the show notes for that, actually. The Voice of Silence, is it called?
Oh, good.
Yeah, it's such a privileged time to be alive, really, when we have this access to information. When you think, centuries ago, majority of the population couldn't even read. We were all, majority of us were illiterate. Even further back, it was just the priestly class who could read or write, or the scribes. Whereas now we're spoiled. In some ways,
we are.
There's a risk, isn't there, of information overload?
Well, it's also back then, people were so busy trying to survive, they wouldn't have had 5 minutes to be able to read a book, much less apply it. They were busy digging ditches and not, going to war. And it was just nonstop labor just to live, just to survive. So to go into a philosophical mindset and sit back and read, then digest, we're very, very lucky. There is so much to be grateful for. And now the thing is with the internet, a lot of people say, oh, it's so bad, blah, blah, blah. It's like a knife. You can use a knife to stab somebody's eyes out, or you can use it to carve a beautiful whatever, or to, work in the garden. So it's how you use it. And the internet is full of these ageless texts. And I can't remember, there was a site that had all of it was Buddha at the gas pump again. And I don't mean to keep plugging him, but it's Rick Archer, and he's now using AI to compress all these so you can actually have them all in one place. It's just brilliant technology for today.
Yeah. Did you? I was going to say, you mentioned Tim earlier. He did a documentary recently that I watched on death. That was pretty spectacular.
He did. Have you watched it yet?
I did. Yeah, I watched it. It's not long. It's about 40 minutes, something like that.
45 minutes long. There's a link to it. You can watch it for free right now if you're listening to this on that Death Show YouTube channel. It is one of the most comforting films. I swear, it's a documentary, and he won a finalist in a recent film festival thing that we submitted it to was it the classification of films that offer hope? I can't remember. I don't have it right in front of me, but it's just beautifully done. He is a passionate, compassionate, hard worker, and he just thinks outside the box and gets this stuff out there. And it's an honor to be doing the show with him. But yes, the myth of death. And he also has Secrets of Infinity. But the myth of death, it is a myth. It is a myth. We're told that it's oblivion. What's so important, if you are listening right now, it is a transition like ice, water, steam. Okay, ice, water, steam is all the same thing, but they're different versions of the same thing. It is a phase transition. It is a doorway to a new beginning. You don't end, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. Death is nothing to be afraid of. I know people are worried about the method of death, like burning alive, of course. But that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the exit of the physical body. We're talking about the annihilation. Even burning alive, those who've come back from that, they say that ends and it's over with. And I look back at it, it's a blip, and this is an illusion anyway. Isn't that what they say?
How is your thinking in this matter of death? How does it relate to the nature of consciousness? Do you think that maybe consciousness is remote? Like one of the analogies I like is that our brain is more like a TV set. And so that's the hardware, but the signal... if you're watching something on TV and you smash up the TV or the brain,
right,
the signal still travels to the set. It's just that the receiver's damaged.
That's a perfect analogy. And Dr. Eddie Villamoria and Tim, we talk about that all the time, which is consciousness. Is our brain a receiver, or is it a sender, or is it both? Right. Dr. Eddie Villamoria phrases it this way. He says, consciousness expresses itself as matter. Not in matter, but as matter. So our consciousness right now, like what we're thinking with, what I'm observing, me talking and hearing my voice, that consciousness is the same as the consciousness that you're listening to your voice or watching the screen. It's the universal consciousness. So we're not separate from it. We are not separate from it, but the brain is both, like you mentioned, from what I understand. Now, remember, I come away from these teachings and whatever I do with way more questions than answers. I really don't. I can't say I absolutely know this. This is just my current understanding at this time. And absolutely, like you say, you break the TV set up. The signal and the picture are still there, but they're not being picked up because that set's gone. But the consciousness is always there. And again, consciousness, he says, expresses itself as matter. Everything that we see, it is as matter, not in it. It's not separate from it. It's all one thing. We are not separate from anything or anyone or any being.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's one of the big mysteries that, these guys, these neuroscientist guys, they just can't come up with a good answer for consciousness, can they? They talk about, it's byproducts of brain chemistry. It's accidental. It's just an accident.
Biochemists will say it's byproducts of biochemistry.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course,
physicists might call bring the quantum realm in. Or...
Yes, physicists will bring quantum uncertainty principles and entanglement and all this.
We
kind of
each
stuff.
wave our own flag, I suppose, in that regard.
Like mystics, like us. It's universal oneness and 1,000 points of light.
The enlightened.
The enlightened. Does it?
There are some. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was just going to say there are some heretics now in the scientific world, like Rupert Sheldrake. Eddie is one. Eben Alexander is another one, where they're coming through and they're blasting through, speaking against the materialist view and saying there is more to our story. And that's really only over the last 50 years are people brave enough to come forward that are actual scientists and moving the bar forward. So I do have some hope. But the big question, whenever anybody's asked, what is consciousness? It would be like synonymous for God, I guess. Or there are people that say it was even, you didn't mention the word consciousness. It was just something you just didn't do because we couldn't possibly know the unknown. So I'm not sure if anybody's ever had an actual real definition, because I think it is the undefinable, the absolute. I don't know.
Do you think, with that in mind, Anne, that there is a difference between being unconscious and being dead from a receiver-transmitter perspective?
Okay, I say that question again. Is there a difference between being dead
and being unconscious? Now, from a biological perspective, it's clear that there is a difference. But from from a different perspective, from a transmitter receiver, the whole idea of consciousness as a thing, is there any difference?
Yeah. I think that because we're talking about that would be the death of the physical brain, which is simply the place that the consciousness comes in, like the pineal gland, all of that they talk about where the consciousness comes into. Mm-hmm. I think that, who was it that said sleep is like death? It's the closest you can get to death. So you're unconscious. There's different states of consciousness where it's like alpha, theta, data, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but so I think that we can, take a look at what you're talking about. But I think that being unconscious, where we're out of our heads, like if you're thinking about like alcohol, I don't know if you ever explored that, when the teachings explain when we're out of our head, where we're unconscious because we've drank too much and we're literally not inhabiting our body, we're logged off, if you will. That entities do inhabit the body because it's available to inhabit. So that's where the name alcohol came from, algol, which means to be out of your head. And there's more there. I know it sounds strange. Have you ever heard that? Have you ever heard them talk about the spiritual effects?
It's news to me.
You've not heard about this? Just Google. I wouldn't be the one to do the interview, but there are people who talk about the spiritual consequences of alcoholism or addiction when we are unconscious or blacked out, that there are astral entities that crave the human life, and they see that you're not obviously using that, and so they will come in, and many times that's why there's a lot of anger and sex and fighting and things like that, it's almost like a possession of sorts. So that's like being out of your head, and that would be unconscious. So I don't know, I guess sleep, a deep sleep, I do think we visit the astral world when we sleep. I'm pretty sure we go back there, and that's why it's so difficult if you don't get a chance to recharge and have that sleep. It's not just a physical thing, it's also a spiritual thing. So I don't know if that answered your question at all, but you definitely need to look up the spiritual consequences of addiction.
Absolutely. I mean, it's very interesting. I wonder from two perspectives of what you've just said there, Anne, I wonder if there's a heavy link there to the sort of Middle Eastern religions and their attitude towards alcohol and being, maintaining that focus and connection to God. But then from the opposite side, it does sound like an awfully convenient excuse for some of the terrible things that people do when they are drunk and out of their mind. Oh, I was possessed, or...
Well, it feels like I was, that's why they call it spirits. And I want you to look it up. It's Algol, A-L-G-O-L. Anyway, when 22 years ago, it's 2025 almost, the year was 2002. And I was a raging alcoholic, and I had lost everything, looking at 3 years in prison, and I lived homeless. But I will tell you that when, and I would have crawled over my dying son's body at the time to have another drink at that time. That's the madness. That's what it was. Horrific, absolute hell on earth. And when people don't understand what it was like to be addicted, why don't you just stop? Just don't have another drink. And I'm like, yeah, why didn't I think of that? It's not like there's a drive and there's almost like you're in there, but something much stronger and darker has a hold of you. Now, I would describe it like possession. It felt like that, but it's not because I'm not responsible for that. Obviously, I'm very responsible for all of it. But when I found out about the spiritual consequences, where if you are uninhabiting your body, if you have passed out and you're not there, this is something that they talk about. Blavatsky talks about it. I've seen other people write articles about it. A lot of the times it is called the consequences, spiritual consequences of that. But I think we're all responsible for what we do when we're drinking. But it's a very real thing, these astral entities, that I think we could get our heads around. I don't know. I wasn't expecting to talk about that. But I would say that that's what it felt like. And it was hellish, worse than any hell I could even begin to describe.
It totally makes sense to me. When you drink to a certain extent, or you take some sort of mind-altering compound, you're surrendering your consciousness, and you wake up the next day with no memory of what's happened. And I can see that being you've left a vacuum for opportune malevolent forces to inhabit.
It sounds strange, but I don't.
Yeah, it's kind of upsetting in some ways when you think of it like that. But, I mean, that's kind of what's happening just on the face of it. You're not yourself. You do things that you would never do in your normal, sober mind. It's a hard one to get around. I mean, you know a lot about addiction, don't you, Matt?
Look into somebody who can really talk about it, because it's a real thing, and it's throughout the literature, and there's lots of people who have explained it much better than I have. And it sounded at first, I did the same thing, hands on my hips, going, well, that's bullshit, blah, blah, blah. But then I went, wait a minute. In 2002, when it was the darkest of the dark, I felt that darkness. I did feel that when it was really, really, really strong. And when my husband would ask, who doesn't have any kind of issue with alcohol, he goes, what does it feel like? Why do you do it? I go, it just feels like possession in a way. But I think that might be a little bit outside what we're talking about. And it's certainly outside my expertise, other than my own research that I did in self-destruction. But it is something, it could be a fascinating podcast for you guys, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Anne.
We'll move on. We'll move back to death, eh? What time are we on? We've got 10 minutes yet. About 10 minutes.
I was just wondering, I suppose if you were to talk to someone who was particularly scared of death, how would you go about advising them to perhaps overcome that? Because it's quite, you've sort of said a few times, haven't you? It's not something to be afraid of. It's like transitional. It's just a different kind of form or whatever. So it's one thing saying that to a person. How do you make someone, I guess, believe essentially, or go on that journey to acceptance of it? How would you go about it, do you think?
It's a great question. Bless your heart. I really wish I had an accurate answer. They would have to want to look further. A lot of people because the death hurts mostly. All of it is the people who are left behind, because you're not going to see that person. And that is an ending. And that pain is real, because that person is no longer in this physical world, and you will not see them again for years. And that loss is real. And that is a very deep pain. And that's why the grief and the wailing and gnashing of teeth. So whenever I do, like when my father passed in 2019, after me understanding these teachings, I was like, yeah, Dad, that's great. He graduated. And my husband goes, you need to calm down, because no one else thinks like you do. Just calm down, because they need to be sad and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh shit, that's right. Excuse me. I was like, I didn't understand. I was really happy for him. I would miss him. I miss him still to this day. And I think about him, wondering how he's doing, kind of a thing. I don't think of him as ending. I'm like, I wonder how he's getting on. I wonder what's happening with this and for that, and how that worked out for him. And anyway, so the question that you have is, I would love to be able to download what my understanding is, or the near-death experience, their understanding. They say the same thing. They come back and go, oh my God, I am totally cool whenever it does happen. And I just am here to be able to tell people about it's going to be okay, that there's nothing to be afraid of. But unless you are receptive and you want to hear that, you can't change anybody's feeling about it. And a lot of people like to hold on to it. Like, I've suffered a loss. I am a victim. And this hurts me because that person is gone. So I'm justified in this pain. And they are not going to move unless they want to. Just like back in the day, I didn't stop drinking until I wanted to, or I had to, or they made me, and I had no choice. So as many people would say, you really should stop, blah, blah, blah. Unless you are ready, you're not going to be ready. So I can't do it for anybody else.
Just to tie together 2 or 3 things we've talked about. So there's death, the nature of consciousness, and we've talked about psychoactive compounds. I'm just thinking back to the ex-serviceman we had on, who had that experience with LSD, was it?
Oh, right, yeah.
We've heard, there's lots of reports of people who have maybe ayahuasca experiences or mushroom experiences or LSD, and come back with a completely different conception of consciousness and death, and completely removes their fear of death. Is that anything you've looked into, Anne?
Well, as much as back in the day, I was like, oh yeah, I would love to do that. But in a way, I would have. But it's in a way, it's cheating. And I think it might help some. And I can't say what my thought is. It's not for everybody. But I think Eddie described it as, you could be at the Albert Hall and there could be this huge grand piano and the crowd is out there and you're behind the screen, and you could run up and play the piano and then run off the stage. You've played the Albert Hall, you've played the piano, but it's not really playing the Albert Hall, is it? It's you're go up to the veil, you can peek, but it isn't earned and it isn't genuine. But I think it's beautiful that there are those plants that people have discovered that do bring people comfort. And if it brings them comfort and it works for them, then great. And I just have to say, from my own experience with drugs and alcohol, and having to pull my head out and understand that it's all about doing it the right way. I know that it's like a little bump. It's a little bump, a little cheat kind of a thing, but it's not quite the real thing. But if it helps people and it's not harming anybody, then whatever you want to do, that's fine. But for me, I know that where I'm at, I have to, this is what I want to do. But I do find it fascinating when people come back and they say, oh, I was able to understand, all my past lives, and I can see all these dimensions and states of being. And I'm like, I wanna, just like anybody else would. But in my understanding, you don't even have to have an ayahuasca or a near-death experience to be able to bring back that wisdom. It's in the teachings, the ageless wisdom. Again, it's called Theosophy or the perennial philosophy. It's called many, many, many names, and it's all over the world. And it's the commonalities of all the world's religions, sciences, and philosophies. Watch near-death experiences for a while. Listen to them when you're driving around, and the same stuff is coming through, the same stuff. But I think people want to have a spiritual experience, because in a way they feel, people still want to feel special, and they want that, I want to see a ghost, I want to have that, because they want to have that meaning and purpose. And so I understand why they would want to, but I would have to say, I don't recommend it.
Yes, no biological free lunch, as I forget his name. Yes, but I mean, people have talked about natural ways to find that same level of conscious experience, like meditation and stuff. Do you know anything about that, Anne?
I do know that you can quiet the mind. You don't have to have, I paid like £2,000 or something like that in the 90s for the transcendental meditation class, which they gave you a mantra. And I expected then, once I paid that money, surely I would have this spiritual orgasm. And I did. And I thought, okay. And I'm thinking, oh my God, no, I wasn't even near ready for it. But I have found there are many ways to quiet the mind. It can be walking in nature. Nature is the church. You are the temple. Nature is where I would say, if you can get between those thoughts, just quiet the thoughts a little bit, and you can be out in nature. It doesn't have to be something hard. It doesn't have to be at the same time every day. but you can quiet. And in there, you can hear the voice of the silence. The voice of the silence is the wisdom of your higher self as it comes through. And people are always thinking, oh, it's so great. It can be some spiritual thing. It's not quite that complicated. It's just natural. You're quieting the voice of the lower self just long enough to be able to hear a little bit from your higher self. And you can do that in the bathtub. You can do it when you're waking up in the morning for a few minutes. Yes, we can access that. The more we quiet our minds, the more we can hear our higher selves.
Is the higher self supposed to sound like high-pitched ringing?
No. Did you say high-pitched drinking or?
Oh, no, ringing, no, tinnitus.
Ringing, oh. High-pitched, you know what? Are you talking, well, tinnitus, I mean, some people say that tinnitus is the appearance of higher beings, but the higher self, the way I identify them is the lower self is going to be the first one up to bat. The first one is going to be judgmental. It's going to take everything personal. It's going to be really loud, angry, ignorant, insisting. The higher self is one of compassion, kindness, understanding, patience, wisdom, reflection. Those are the vices and virtues that the religions have taught us forever. That they're describing the higher and the lower self. And our job here is to overcome the only thing we can, which is ourself. We overcome ourselves, we can react differently, and we learn, and we allow the higher self to guide a little bit more. And it's really difficult to get that under control. Our egos and our need to be right and our sense of importance. It's very difficult, but it can be done. And you can do it in any way that works for you. My prescription would be anything natural. It doesn't have to be on the beach, somewhere in nature, and just breathe. Just breathe for a little bit. Just be in nature. Set everything down just for a minute, even if it's 30 seconds. Just set a little timer for 3 minutes. That's fine.
Self-remembering, Uspensky called it, in the fourth way. Just trying to be sort of present in the moment. We've got so much stuff going through our heads constantly, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it's like you don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be a fakir. You don't have to be a yogi. You just have to practice a bit of mindfulness is the trendy term, isn't it? That's come into vogue in the last 10 years or so. Mindfulness. Is that a similar sort of thing, do you think?
Yeah, I think it was Alan Watts. I was watching a TikTok or something about, he said, if you ever want to get into that state, just literally quiet your mind and listen to anything you can hear. If it's cars going by, if it's a clock ticking, you just listen, use your ears to listen. That sense will bring you into a space where, or your breath, some people say your breath, but it doesn't have to be as complicated as some people make it. And some people go up their own asses about it and, it has to be 20 minutes a day and then this, it doesn't have to be that at all. It's literally just you quieting the constant chatter of I have to do this. This is You're just going to quiet that for a minute, just for a second, even if it's 10 seconds. That's it. Then you did 10 seconds, do 20 seconds next time. But just don't be so hard on yourself and don't take life. It's not as serious as we make it. We make it so miserable and so serious and so awful. It doesn't have to be that way. We're here also to enjoy ourselves. And anything spiritual, as I talked about at the beginning, there should be much more lightheartedness. We need to laugh and have fun. There's joy to be had. This is a heck of an opportunity to be alive.
Well, I was going to say that's a really positive note to end on. Do you not think? We're just coming up to an hour now.
I'm going to miss you. You guys have been so sweet. Every single one of you. I hope I didn't talk over you. You're so lovely. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing what you do.
We'll have you again soon. Let's keep in touch and continue this further down the line. But is there anything else you want to say or need to tell the listeners and viewers about before we wrap up?
Just that it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. There was a near-death experience. Her name was Amy. I can't remember her last name, but she goes, one of the things I really want to bring back is that if it's not okay, it's not over. And that means it's going to be okay. And I don't know how else to sum it up other than that, but I promise you, what you see in the near-death experiences is the reflection of what is in these ancient teachings. These are instructions for humanity. You can have access to them because you have a computer or you have a phone. And I promise you, death comes to us all. It is not fatal, final, or permanent. Make the most of what you've got while you're here. It is nothing to be afraid of. There is nothing to fear. It is just a doorway to a new beginning.
Wow, brilliant. Well, I think we should sign off on.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I just loved it, you guys. It was so much fun. Thank you for all that you do. And I look forward to sharing this. I did a little promo thing on it. I'll be happy to share. Stay in touch, and thank you again.
Oh, yeah.
And have a wonderful.
Thank you.
Do you want a copy of the video? I can send you a copy if you want to, if it's any use.
Yes, please.
Right,
I would love
do.
that.
I'll send you a Google Drive link tomorrow. Right.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Sam.
Good night, gentlemen. Beautiful souls. Good night. Good night.
Night, Anne.
TT.
Have a good one.
Good night. Do I close? Do I leave? Oh, thank you. I'll see you later. I'll just let me leave.
It's all
Okay.
right. I'll boot,
Okay, bye.
I'll boot you. Right.
Okay, bye. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, right, that was Anne. She's wonderful, isn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
What a treat.
For a Sunday night.
Yes. Links in the show notes to check out that death show. It's just, we timed this really well. It's just started releasing videos.
Yeah.
Her and Tim. So check them out. And we shall adjourn for 10 minutes.
15.
15? Well, okay. Who's counting? Who's counting? They're like, we're all going to die, you know, Matt. Well, the amount of difference it makes, it's 10 or 15.
But it's fine.
It's fine.
Yeah.
And we'll open the phone lines.
Oh, it's that night.
It's a hotline night. It's the second Sunday of the month.
The second
Hotline.
Sunday.
I'm
Right.
sure there's lots to chat about, so give us a call.
Yeah, we're going to have a beautiful phone in.
The
Right.
best.
The bestest half night ever. Ugh. Right. Sayonara. See you in 10 minutes. Bye.
Bye.